My name is Hopewell Chin'ono. I'm a Zimbabwean journalist and I'm based in Harare. I trained at the Zimbabwe Institute of Mass Communications in the 90s and then left for the United Kingdom to do my postgraduate studies. And I came back to Zimbabwe in 2003. And upon my return home, I started facing a lot of problems with the state and its authorities regarding my reporting. I was working as a freelance journalist for the BBC World Service, and I was banned from reporting because the state authorities wanted me to work with an outfit that was a surrogate for the government of Robert Mugabe. I refused to do that, and they refused to license me. At that point, I realized that my dream to become a journalist in Zimbabwe and to become a journalist in a country that respected the role of media in order for the country to thrive was not going to be. So I applied for another British government scholarship to go to Britain to study documentary filmmaking. I left the country in 2006 and I spent a year in England of study, and then I came back in 2007. After completing my second master's in documentary film practice, which was essentially documentary filmmaking, I had to come back home. And because I had switched from radio to documentary film practice, the only feasible platform that I could operate from was in television news. So I joined ITV News, and I was doing some freelance work for South African E-News at the time. That was around 2008. The working condition had become more terrible and more toxic than what it was when I left the country in 2006. We were being harassed. The police would call you on a Friday and threaten to lock you up until Monday without taking you to court. Journalists were being beaten up, some were abducted, and it was a real terrible situation at the time. And because I was working for ITV News, I had become a marked man because it was seen as somebody who was working for the white British colonial establishment. And we were constantly reminded of that reality by the spokesperson for the president, George Charamba. He would write things that were so terrible but full of lies about our role as journalists working for the international media. It became so difficult that when it came to the 2008 election, the state banned me from covering that election. I'm a Zimbabwean journalist and filmmaker. I had the cruel privilege of having a front row seat witnessing my country descend into a violent village. People were beaten up and some were even murdered for simply practicing a basic human right to vote for a leader of their own choice. This film is a record of what I saw.
In 2008, there can be no doubt that violence has now become the only method of campaigning.
It's painful for my family. People who are so innocent, who don't even know what politics is all about, being brutalized.
We can't rush to say, the X is the one, that will change the destiny of this country. The British wants to use backdoor politics to try and recolonize Zimbabwe. And we're saying, no, that will not happen.
The children's room is up there, and they went to the door of the children's room and they were trying to terrorize the children.
I was shivering. I was scared. Yes. I was also scared.
We believe in ideas, but if everything comes to the extreme, our weapons will defend our ideas.
It's not allowed.
This is what you're trying to do, bring violence. Whoa, whoa.
In Zimbabwe, journalists have to be licensed by the Zimbabwe Media Commission. And it had become clear at that point in time in 2008 that this commission was being used as a political tool to control who was writing what, when, and how, and what sort of broadcasting outfits were allowed into the country. And because I was working for the international media, I was constantly denied the license to practice as a journalist. This has become a very difficult situation in Zimbabwe because it means that if journalists report the truth that they are seeing, they become victimized and they lose their income. So this licensing is used as a tool to control journalists, knowing very well that they will toe the line. By towing the line, I mean that they will report as the state wishes, as the ruling party ZANU-PF wants them to, and as the government of the day wants them to. And these three institutions, the state, ZANU-PF, and the government, they are conflated. At times, one will be speaking in government, speaking like they're speaking for the ruling party, or they will be speaking for the state, speaking like they're speaking for the ruling party. So it becomes very difficult for journalists to operate under such an environment where even state institutions like the police are used to deal with journalists who are perceived not to be towing the line. And I became one of those journalists. And I was not alone. It was 3 of us who were stopped from covering the election, but we still covered it. And we uncovered the use of violence as a tool to control citizens after they had voted for the opposition. It became the post-election violence in Zimbabwe.
What we see is that there is violence on the ground. People are being butchered, and really perhaps it's an opportunity to say to the leaders of Zimbabwe, it can't be that Zimbabwe, the images you see of Zimbabwe in international media throughout the world, are these pictures of people who are battered, bruised, and butchered.
From one of the continent's most troubled countries, Zimbabwean journalist Hopewell Chin'ono's compelling documentary stood out above the rest, earning him the title of Africa's best.
This was a powerful, moving and compelling piece of work.
Caletra, one of the drugs that is used for HIV treatment, is 12 million. To put it into perspective, a doctor in Zimbabwe earns about 6 million Zimbabwean dollars. So it will need to take them 2 months' salary to be able to buy that drug, which is for 1 month.
It's a story about hope and about life. It's not a story about disease and death.
In 2008, I won the CNN African Journalist of the Year award. I was subsequently awarded the Nieman Fellowship at Harvard University. I left again the country for a year whilst I was studying at Harvard in the United States of America. When I came back, it was the days of the unity government, where the opposition party, the MDC, and the ruling party, ZANU-PF, were governing the country together. We thought things were going to be different. Fast forward to 2015, another journalist was abducted. His name was Itai Zamara. He was never to be found. Up to now, we do not know what happened to Itai Zamara. That in itself instilled another sense of fear in journalists, the fear of God, knowing that if they could take somebody like this and get away with it, what about everyone else? What security do we have? Who is going to hold the government of the day to account for its actions? Itai Zamara is still missing.
Step by teetering step, the shackled inmate is a former ITV News journalist. His fate in court is one thing, but on this, day 43 of his detention, it's his health now causing most concern.
I've got a fever. I'm not well, but I've been forced to come to court.
3 years after the removal of Robert Mugabe, nothing has changed. Things have gotten worse. I was arrested 3 times in 6 months in 2020 and 2021 and spent 81 days in prison for exposing corruption. That is the reality that we face now in Zimbabwe. We hope that one day the media will be able to operate freely. in order for our country to thrive.